Hi everyone, it's Cal. I'm here to talk about the Kundalini like I always do. And today I want to talk about something called feeling and following the cues. So it's so important, and many of you know this, to be following the subtle feeling. And this isn't emotional reaction. This is subtle feeling. Because the mother force from which you came from is always leading you back to her. And this is the feminine force. When you do get back to her, you've gone full circle. And the bridge to getting there is the Kundalini, which eventually takes you there after achieving a very long set of tasks. So every day, your mind is learning to attain and build itself to hold power. Power is force. It's your mind's way of weightlifting. You have cycled until you've reached the level of human, and now you acquire and balance your forces, feminine and masculine, and through doing so, you naturally begin the Kundalini, which anchors your bond with the earth, anchoring your spirit to fuel yourself to the heavens. So whether you're married, have children, single, working, your path has been designed so that you are always following your cues in your everyday life. So whether it's your daily task or adventures or being in the workforce, you are building and strengthening your forces and balancing them at every turn. Even when you form a boundary, you are refining your energy. You are establishing your identity, which will serve you, and then at some point begin to fade. For example, when talking about masculine and feminine forces, I was dominant in the feminine force, which is highly intuitive, but I struggled with trusting that which I could not see. I needed to trust feeling. I also had a lot of masculine power, which needed to be focused. Critical thinking needed to be established, through acquiring a lot of life knowledge, empirical knowledge. Boundaries. Oh, I've had such problems with establishing boundaries. Logic, strength, and structure and confidence. And all of this needed to be tamed, right? It needed to be harnessed. So just talking a little bit about my own path can show you sort of how some of this stuff manifests. As you know, I was born on and grew up on my Saturn line and lived there on and off for about 50 years. Saturn is the cruel taskmaster, just in case you don't know, and the one who puts you in line. It is like being in the military. But the harsh cruelty of Saturn makes you pull up your bootstraps. And I was very undisciplined. Now I'm a sergeant. But yet, this Saturn placement is why I traveled so much, to escape the pressure of this line, but I always returned. So let's get back to those cues. About 25 years ago, I reached a new learning phase in my life and my development when I became pregnant, and I began to have a thirst for just painting. And it came on so suddenly, but I took the cue and I began painting and repainting my house, so much so that a neighbor came over who happened to have a master's in art and said, "Gee, Cal, these are all the hallmarks of being a frustrated artist. So here's some brushes, acrylic paints, and a canvas." Again, I took the cue and my painting career began. But it was strange because every time I lifted a brush, I could only paint a large naked woman. And when I deviated, I felt terrible. And I ended up, in the end, painting over that painting with a painting of a large naked woman, just to feel at ease. And of course, the mind wanted to know why. Why am I feeling this way? The mind was so troubled, troubled with thoughts of, who knows, maybe I had a mother complex, maybe I was gay, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. The infantile mind just rattles on and on and on, rather than just doing what you feel. So I painted a fat naked woman over and over, sometimes with a baby, sometimes not, for many, many years. And then I ran into someone by chance, who had studied art a very great deal, who looked at my art and said, "It's so obvious that you are painting the goddess." I didn't know who the goddess was. And she told me about the work of Maria Gimbutas, forensic archaeologist. So I went and I studied this woman's work, Maria Gimbutas, and learned that she had practiced her trade of archaeology around the globe, forensic archaeology. And what she found at all the dig sites that she was at was that it was so clear to her that all early civilizations were worshiping a female deity, the goddess. And this was interesting because these tribes appeared to not be connected with one another, and they were peaceful tribes as well. But I'm not getting into female domination or anything, because the female force lives in men too, just as much, sometimes more. In fact, many great male leaders were very much in touch with their feminine side, which makes them compassionate. Now, this is not about male versus female. This is about integration of the self and then balance. The point is that I kept following the cues. I was on a path of self-discovery. And I didn't know it, but I just kept following the cues. Then, not long after, another neighbor came by with an astral travel CD. And she didn't like it. She wasn't into it. She wanted to know if I wanted to try it. And as a young traumatized child, I had OBEs regularly. Because it was the only way I could rest at night, was leaving my body and floating above it with what looked like a huge silver cord coming out of the back of my head. So I followed the cue because I was naturally interested in this. And I downloaded this to my iPod so I could put it on repeat, because Saturn, the hard taskmaster, had taught me that in order to master things, you must do them again and again. So I followed the cue. And when my daughter was in bed at night, I listened to this on repeat. And after a certain period of time, things started to happen. I started leaving my body. But this time it was different. This time an energy would come and get me. And one of the first times, I remember it so well because I was shown a vision. And in this vision, I witnessed an old 1950s classroom, you know, with the old wooden school desktops and, you know, the iron chair attached to the desk frame. And the people sitting at the desk were adults, both young and old, and they were all dressed for different vocations, but nonetheless, they were all there. And the one thing that they had in common was that they were all bored. They were all slumped in their chairs while a teacher droned on and on and on. Now, I was watching all this, and I was invisible to them, and I could feel the presence that was taking me through this beside me, and I followed this presence down through the center of the class between the desks. And as I followed his cue, right? I followed the cue of the energy leading me this way. And as we got to the back of the classroom, there was an open closet, what looked like a closet door. And beyond that, I could see the sparkling cosmos. And I didn't hesitate. I took the cue and I went through the door, and I was suddenly suspended in space. And I was a bit afraid because there was no ground, just open space. And interesting, right after this thought, 4 walls appeared around me. No floor, no roof, but I felt safer. And after that, my energy friend appeared to me so alive and so vibrant. And when I looked at him, he was a mini universe. And by the way, if you want to know how you are a mini universe, I'm putting together this webinar. I think it's called a webinar, where you show people something online, and you can join that by clicking on the link that's in the description if you want to. So he was a mini universe, and he appeared to me this cluster of stars with a center exactly like a galaxy, and his stars were the colors of light, of the light spectrum: green, yellow, white, lilac. I mean, and he was so just sparkling, radiant, beautiful, and fun, and like a playful puppy that just wanted to play, but hugely intelligent. Hugely intelligent. And it was like we were connected. And he was being so gentle and careful not to scare me. He knew everything I was going to do before I did it. We didn't look connected, but we were connected. And everything I did, he mimicked. And because he was so predictable, and because he adapted to me, it helped my overactive mind relax. So I did astral travel for a while, and then a couple of years later, a strange thing happened again. I was reading about Hermes Trismegistus. I think I pronounced that incorrectly, so I'm sorry about that. And how meditation will bring you bounty. And he was named the thrice great, and I'll tell you why later. And I took the cue at that point to begin meditation, mostly because of circumstance at the time. I felt so stuck on my Saturn line. I still didn't know it was my Saturn line. And being ambitious, I began meditation because of reading that meditation will bring you bounty. I didn't really realize that the bounty was self-knowledge, and that to know thyself is the greatest bounty that you can ever have, regardless of anything. It is the biggest bounty that you can have. So yeah, I took the cue, and the key thing to remember about meditation is that it is a discipline. And again, Saturn had taught me to discipline yourself, you must be on repeat. So daily meditation became a habit that I built on. And on a side note, I want to mention that even when I thought I had a bad day, because of lack of focus, or because something in my body was hurting and my mind became asphyxiated with it during meditation, it was still a good day in meditation because I took the motions of the habit to create the discipline. So for those of you that feel that you're failing at meditation, you're not. You're creating the habit. You're saying, regardless of what's happening, I'm going to sit because this is my time for meditation. And in that, you tell your body, mind, the universe, what your intention is. So it aided me just going to the place that I always did the meditation 3 times a day in the beginning and I always went to the same spot, and I went for the same amount of time. I didn't try to be fancy. I didn't try to, wear special clothes. I didn't try to do anything. I just went there to focus my mind 3 times a day for 10 minutes in the beginning. At that time, I worked for Microsoft, so I would actually meditate in the broom closet because it's the only place no one would go in. So 3 times a day, and simply by being committed and disciplined, the energy begins to focus and simultaneously build. So later I found myself meditating at home, and for a great deal of time I stayed with it, and I was presented by a memory and then the moon. The memory was from a place beyond me. It was from a place of knowing, and I was illuminated with the greater truth behind the memory of which I played a part in. And the pain of the truth was excruciating. Now, just remember, the mother force is all knowing, and she knows what will break you. She knows she doesn't want to break you to the point of death. She wants to break you to near death. She wants to break you and bring you to your knees, because what happens is your meditation, your vibration drops so much in depth that your meditation takes on a massive resonance. And it's the resonance of meditation that is so vital. And really could talk about meditation forever. It's so fascinating. So yes, it broke me to my knees, and I meditated in a great state of anguish, deep compassion for humanity pouring down my face for weeks. But I continued. I stayed committed, And so deeply compassionate in meditation, actually, that I was visited by an angel. Maybe some of you know the story, who looked down at me with so much love and so much grace. But my fear of this thing, because I didn't know angels existed. I thought this was all hairy fairy stuff for my entire life, pretty much. So I was in a state of shock and had no clue. And my fear affected my vibration, of course, and the angel started to dissipate, and she wouldn't come back even when I called. So I still stayed with it. And after that, this very strange thing happened to me. I was visited by the moon. Now, this is kind of bizarre. Uh, but one afternoon, I had been meditating all morning. Can't remember where my daughter was, but I stepped outside of where I live, my house, and the moon was right in front of me. Big as a skyscraper. I could almost touch it. Huge, right in front of me. Incredible. I was astonished. I really didn't know what to think at that point. I asked people on the street if they could see this. And from the look on their faces, they told me that I was nuts. So I knew I was seeing in a sacred way. Thankfully, I had read a little bit about that, or I don't know really what I would do except carry on, of course. So it was from this point that meditation really took a plunge. After the moon visit, it took a big, deep plunge. And I continued to follow cues, although it had switched over. These cues were totally 100% based internally. And your cues always are, no, not always are, majority of them are. And then things come to you, and then the cue is yes to this and yes to that. You become a master at discerning what you need through your connection to the center. So I continued the discipline, and the Kundalini at this time was laying its foundation in order to anchor. It was at this point that, out of the blue, a Vedic astrologer came my way without knowing what I was doing and told me that there would be a very pivotal point where I would have to take a leap of faith and trust. And it served me well, because in the depths of Kundalini, when the fire came, when the bird came, when my heart was being ripped out of my rib cage and all these things were happening, that memory of her telling me that, I knew through feeling, as I was thinking about it, I knew, because the feeling came forward that says, yes, this is the time that you are going to trust. And so I did. I stayed in the fire and burned and everything else. And that's all history now. But I was following the emotional cue. So you know about the rest, because I talk about my Kundalini experience in the video. That I'll throw it below if you haven't seen it. And after the Kundalini, my mind became so overworked with the need to know absolute truth that the obsession with research began. And if you want to know about this truth, you can meet me on the webinar. I think I mentioned it earlier, and I'll put it below. So it wasn't long after that the mind started to break down, because the mind just rattles on, because the mind does not know. That's why it's the administrator. It does not know. What knows is something beyond you that lives inside of you. So now that I look back after the Kundalini, I can see that throughout the phase of the mind being overworked, I stopped following the cues. The mind became obsessed with understanding and began to really overwork for many, many years, pouring through research, trying to find, religious leaders that knew what was going on. And I mean, it was almost all in vain. So when the mind is overworked, it becomes rigid, and it does not go with the flow, and it does not follow the subtle emotional cues, and the mind body becomes unbalanced, thus shifting your vibration. And this is where the lack of balance becomes so much, weakening the immune system and bringing illness. And this is another reason why listening to your center and staying tight with your center is so important, and not getting dislodged with absolute truth, the knowledge, the why of everything, staying rooted in self. So then we have to come to the point where we have to rebalance ourselves and get our alignment back, which we can do through a variety of things. And I have to say that the top three are probably diet, exercise, and rest. And really focusing on those three basics, and then you build on those. Now, having the mind relax, art is a good beginner form of meditation when you've fallen out, to bring it back into alignment. To focus the mind, allow the body to relax. There are many things that can help create balance and get the mind back into alignment. I say art because I'm an artist. And even if I wasn't doing art things, or even sometimes playing games, or just trying to take the mind off its major focus, I mean, that's so critical at this point. By following the subtle feeling cues, you're always following the leader who lives inside your core. Inside your core is your vortex. There is no better teacher. That is the one. Before I started meditation, I think I've told some of you, I was looking for meditation teachers all over the place. They were all so incredibly expensive. And, you know, the religious teachers, they're not teaching you if you don't got the coin ready. So the only place I could go was within. But thankfully that happened, because this is the best teacher for everyone. So again, we are building and rebalancing our feminine and masculine forces, and the ability to accurately discern what is right for us, which is why knowing thyself is so critical. So how do we know the self? I mean, this is really the ultimate big question for everyone on the planet. And it's through doing our path and self-reflection, meditation, that rebalances our body, mind, and gives us insight into ourselves to really know what is right for us, what isn't right for us. And it doesn't mean that what's right for us right now is going to be not right for us tomorrow, because living in the now and listening to the cues is vital to get you to where you're going. If you're locked in the future, you're getting nowhere. If you're locked behind, you're in arrested development. I mean, it's just, we know that. It's also good to know that action also releases and builds knowledge, and all of it results in greater self-understanding. Self-understanding is not pivotal to a happy life. You can just be happy if you want. But I feel it is pivotal to a fulfilling life. And the quest to know the self is the ultimate quest, and the teacher lies inside the outward doer, inside. And again, following the subtle force, following the cues of the subtle force, is following the teacher. And then you use your mind as an administrator to your center. This is the balanced teamwork between the mother-father forces. The mind is not the leader. The mind needs to administrate the cues that come forward, which bring you to a new place of feeling. And with the new feeling comes new thought. And your new thought is always leading the way for you, one baby step at a time, to help you have greater self-realization, because this life is first and foremost about you and your connection to your center. So following the cues, again, is vital. I know I'm saying this over and over. Now, I think I know I mentioned it to you, but if you want to see how a little bit more about the webinar, how you physically relate to the Earth, galaxy, and universe, and all that is, and how you are headed to where you're going. This is just a little bit more information about the universe, the webinar. Then you can click on the link below and give it a read and see if it appeals to you. I hope you found this information helpful. I also hope you have a fabulous day, and I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, follow the subtle cues. Bye for now.